Why is it that the more we work, the less we question? There's a strange kind of quiet that descends when the machine starts humming. Not a peaceful quiet, but a suppression, like a heavy blanket over your thoughts. You sit at your desk, or you stand behind a register, or you drive for hours delivering packages you'll never open, and somewhere along the way, you forget what you were supposed to ask. The job becomes your answer, your schedule becomes your purpose, and slowly the questions, the dangerous ones, die in the noise. They gave you a job not to empower you, but to occupy you. It starts subtly. You're told it's about independence. Get a job, pay your bills, be responsible. It sounds noble, but what's really being taught is obedience. Routine, the art of endurance without rebellion. Your labor becomes your leash. Every morning, millions of people rise to fulfill roles they did not create, under rules they did not write, for purposes they do not control. And they call this freedom. But is it freedom if you cannot say no? Work, in its modern form, is not just a means of survival. It is a tool of ideological control. It consumes your hours, dictates your movements, colonizes your mind. You are told to be grateful. At least you have a job. But this gratitude is not rooted in joy. It's rooted in fear. The fear of falling, the fear of poverty, the fear of being nothing, and so you stop asking. You stop asking why wages never seem to rise, even when profits soar. You stop asking why you're exhausted, even when you sleep. You stop asking why you feel so empty, even while you're doing everything right. Because questioning threatens the system, and systems don't like to be threatened. This is not an accident. It's by design. The working class is not just exploited for its labor, it's pacified by its labor. As long as you're too tired to think, too busy to organize, too anxious to protest, nothing will change. Imagine a man on an assembly line. Every piece he touches moves forward, but he stays still. His body is in motion, but his mind is frozen. He knows nothing of the bigger picture. He sees only the next item, the next task, the next hour. That man could be anyone. He could be you. Alienation, Marx wrote, is not just about economic distance, it's about emotional exile. You are estranged from your work, from its purpose, from your fellow workers, and ultimately, from yourself. And in that estrangement, questions cannot grow. In schools, we are taught how to follow. At work, we are taught how to endure. But nowhere are we taught how to ask. Because a question is a spark, a rupture, a seed of revolt. What if work is not what makes us human, but what is used to dehumanize us? What if the job was never meant to elevate you, but to contain you? You were told to chase your passion, to find meaning in your work. But what if the purpose they sold you was just a more elegant chain? The corporate world learned something dangerous. People don't just work harder when they're afraid. They work harder when they believe their work matters. So instead of whips, they gave us mission statements. Instead of chains, they gave us coffee mugs with slogans like, "Do what you love." And somewhere along the way, exploitation got rebranded as ambition. You're told you're part of a family, that your job is about growth, values, impact. But how often have those words shielded something darker? A company that fires you in a heartbeat, calls itself your home. A boss that drains you dry, says you're like family. And you, burnt out, underpaid, replaceable, are expected to smile through it all. This is not purpose. This is gaslighting. The illusion of purpose is one of capitalism's greatest tricks, because it makes you believe your exhaustion is noble, that your suffering is meaningful, that your value is defined by your productivity. And when you break, when you collapse under the pressure, you blame yourself. I wasn't strong enough. I need to hustle harder. I must not love this enough. But the truth is brutal. They never designed this to fulfill you. They designed it to extract everything you have, your time, your energy, your identity, until there's nothing left but compliance. You are not lazy. You are not broken. You are surviving a system that rewards obedience and punishes introspection. Consider this. A young woman works 70 hours a week at a tech startup. She's told she's building the future, but she hasn't seen daylight in weeks. A delivery driver skips lunch to hit his quotas. He tells himself he's supporting his family, but his back aches and no one knows his name. A teacher grades papers at midnight, convinced she's making a difference, but her school cuts funding and her voice is ignored. They all believe they're part of something bigger, but what if the bigger thing was never real? Karl Marx warned us, the more the worker expends himself in work, the more powerful becomes the world of objects he creates, over against himself. In other words, the more you give, the more you lose, unless you own what you create. But most of us don't. We build companies we don't control. We grow brands we don't profit from. We pursue dreams that don't belong to us. And when the dream shatters, they replace you, not because you weren't good enough, but because you were always disposable. The illusion of purpose is not just misleading, it's anesthetic. It keeps you too inspired to revolt, too hopeful to stop, too loyal to ask the question, whose purpose am I really serving? There is a factory inside you, not of metal or machines, but of memory. Every day you clock in, and every day a part of you is erased. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens in the details, in the endless meetings that go nowhere, in the fluorescent lights that bleach the soul, in the polite small talk that hides your discontent. You forget why you started questioning. You forget what made you angry. You forget what it felt like to be alive. Because forgetting is not just a side effect of modern work, it is its purpose. A society that remembers its pain cannot be easily controlled. A worker who remembers injustice cannot be easily managed. So instead, we are flooded with distractions, productivity apps, wellness seminars, motivational quotes, all designed to keep you functioning while you forget who you are. This is not efficiency. This is psychological erasure. Alienation is not just being disconnected from your labor. It's being distanced from your history, from the very parts of yourself that once screamed, "This isn't right." You wake up to an alarm that you did not set. You rush through traffic toward a goal you did not choose. And by the time you sit at your workstation, the silence in your chest is deafening. This is the daily ritual of forgetting. But forgetting is profitable. Because a worker who forgets won't organize. A worker who forgets won't resist. A worker who forgets won't remember that they are not alone. Imagine a room full of people, each isolated in their own cubicle. Each one thinking they're the only one tired, the only one broken, the only one wondering, is this all there is? That's not a coincidence, that's design. The capitalist machine does not want you to connect, because connection leads to conversation, and conversation leads to consciousness. And consciousness? That's dangerous. Karl Marx wrote, "Men make their own history, but they do not make it as they please." He meant that we are born into conditions we didn't choose, but we are not doomed to accept them. Unless we forget, unless we let them grind our memories into dust, day after day. Your exhaustion is not weakness. Your dissatisfaction is not failure. It is the residue of memory. A sign that somewhere inside you still remember that your life is meant to be more than this. More than endless deadlines. More than unpaid overtime. More than smiling for a system that erases your soul in exchange for a paycheck. You were not born to forget. You were born to remember your worth, to remember your voice, to remember the questions they trained you not to ask. And one of the most radical things you can do in a world built to make you forget is to remember. Every 2 weeks they hand you a piece of paper, or more likely, a number on a screen. It's supposed to mean survival, validation, progress. But what if your paycheck is not a reward, but a bribe? What if the money you receive is not just compensation for your time, but payment for your silence? You get just enough to stay afloat, just enough to stay tired, just enough to not revolt. This is the logic of just enough economics, a strategy perfected by capitalism to keep workers obedient and insecure. You're not meant to thrive. You're meant to be afraid of falling. And fear is the enemy of questioning. The moment you wonder, why is the CEO making 400 times more than me? You feel that chill. What if I lose this job? What if I can't pay rent? What if I can't eat? So you swallow the question. You silence the scream. You clock back in. That's the power of economic coercion. It doesn't need chains. It uses the threat of absence, of no money, no shelter, no food, to keep you compliant. You may think you're free, but freedom without security is a mirage. Marx called it wage slavery, a condition where you are technically free to leave your job, but structurally bound to labor in order to live. Because if you stop working, you don't just lose income. You lose identity. You lose safety. You lose your place in society. So most people never leave, they stay, and in staying, they bury the questions. How much of your life have you sold just to survive? How many dreams have you postponed, waiting for the right time? How many injustices have you endured, telling yourself, at least I'm getting paid? The truth is, a paycheck can be a muzzle. It teaches you to tolerate exploitation if the number is high enough, to ignore abuse if the benefits are decent, to endure misery if it comes with a bonus. But what is the cost of that silence? A father who never sees his children because he's working double shifts. A woman who endures harassment because she can't afford to speak up. A generation medicated just to endure another Monday. These are not isolated tragedies. They are symptoms of a system where money replaces morality, where profit is prioritized over people, where survival depends on obedience, where dignity is negotiated through direct deposit. Karl Marx warned us capital is dead labor, which, vampire-like, lives only by sucking living labor, and lives the more labor it sucks. Your paycheck is not a sign of value, it is evidence of extraction. And every time you accept that this is normal, every time you bury the question, you help the machine keep spinning. But buried questions don't disappear, they grow. In the silence of night, in the ache of your back, in the sigh you exhale before starting another shift. And one day, maybe soon, that question will resurface. What am I really being paid for? Somewhere along the way, we were taught that asking questions is dangerous. Not directly, not out loud, but through punishment disguised as professionalism, through silence masquerading as maturity. You asked, why is my pay so low? And they labeled you ungrateful. You asked, why are we doing things this way? And they called you difficult. You asked, what if there's a better way to live? And they said you were naive. So you stopped. But the moment you stop asking is the moment you start disappearing. Capitalism survives not because it's just, or wise, or efficient. It survives because we are trained to stop asking why wealth pools at the top while poverty spreads like mold, to stop asking why our mental health collapses while productivity rises, to stop asking why, after all this effort, we still feel so profoundly alone. But the right to ask is the right to exist, to say, this isn't working, to say, I deserve more than this, to say, what if everything I've been told was meant to keep me small? Marx didn't just give us answers. He gave us the courage to ask better questions. He taught us to see beyond appearances, to understand that systems are not neutral, that power doesn't rest, it defends itself, that every institution that tells you to accept your place was built by those who already have theirs. So what happens when we start asking again? We reconnect. We find each other in the cracks, in shared exhaustion, in whispered doubts, in the quiet courage of the break room conversation that begins with, do you ever feel like none of this makes sense? And from that question comes movement. From that movement comes vision. From that vision comes the kind of solidarity that cannot be bought, silenced, or outsourced. You reclaim your voice, your story, your place in the world, not as a cog in someone else's machine, but as a human being with the audacity to imagine something different. This is not about quitting your job. This is about no longer letting your job define your worth. It's about refusing to accept exhaustion as normal, silence as safety, blind obedience as virtue. It's about looking capitalism in the face and saying, "You may own my time, but you will not own my mind," because the first step to liberation is not revolution, it's remembrance. The remembrance that you were once a child who asked why 1,000 times a day. That somewhere in you still lives that voice, quiet but undying. The voice that whispers, "There must be more than this." And the truth is, there is. But you have to start by asking, what if you've never truly been tired, only suppressed? What if your anxiety isn't a flaw, but a signal? What if your discontent isn't a problem to fix, but a truth to follow? You've done everything they asked, worked hard, stayed quiet, played the game, and yet something still aches. That ache is not weakness, it is your awareness, buried under routine, resurfacing. It's the knowledge that your life is worth more than surviving. That purpose cannot be found in serving a machine designed to forget you. So here's the question that begins it all. What would your life look like if you were no longer afraid to ask? In a world that tells you to be grateful for exploitation, asking is rebellion. In a system that profits from your silence, questioning is power. And in a life that's been sold piece by piece, reclaiming your voice is the beginning of everything. So ask. Ask loudly. Ask often. Ask with others. Because the moment you ask, you are no longer alone. If this made you feel something, if it put words to something you couldn't name, then don't let it end here. Leave a comment. Tell us what you've remembered. What question still burns inside you? And above all, subscribe. Because in the next video we go even deeper into the myths that keep us blind and the truths that can set us free.